So for first few minutes, for next 5 minutes around, I'm going to tell you about our this technical committee or special technical community here. So we have started me and Professor Amit Misra from Cape Town, and with other core members from both industry and academia, we have combinedly put effort to start a special technical committee in IEEE Computer Society in 2000 early 2021, uh, and this is our first annual event. So the first thing I just like to let you know, many of us, like when we publicize the call for nomination for the award, and also when we popularize in other events, many people get confused with the term buy inspired. What are we doing inside computer society? If it's something looks like, biological stuff. So as the name implies here, the bio inspired computing, there are many computer engineering, computer science, electrical engineering, electronics, combined, there are many things happening that are actually inspired from biological structure. Like you can see here, there's something like very briefly, I've taken this from the from the Wikipedia. If you can search in Wikipedia, you're going to find many of these topics, like neural networks, cellular automata, communication network protocol, sensor networks, AI. Many of this kind of Utopia actually falls under the bio-inspired computing. Definitely, the technique what we are using in our engineering or in computer science domain, those are actually inspired from the biological structure. So I think if anyone or maybe a few audience maybe not aware about this thing, and I got lots of questions from many people, so I thought of preparing this slide so that everyone should know that okay, we are not doing anything related to biology, rather we are working on the engineering side or the science side, but those techniques is actually inspired from biological structure. And in our special technical committee, this is a smaller one, but the topic or the area covered in the bio-inspired computing, it's huge. Like you can start from communication, networking, security, learning, AI, many things can come together. So here actually we are going with three different ways. First one is the education and learning. For that one, we annually uh, prepare two newsletters, then one published in around mid something April, May, and another at the end of the year, around October or November. And activities, we are actually we have to do some event with the ComSec. I think if you know, this is one of the flagship conference of IEEE Computer Society, and we organize one workshop event every year. As this is the first year, or definitely we are going to start it from next year. So from next year onwards, there will be a dedicated event more on bio-inspired computing that will be led by our STC. Alongside, we are also creating symposiums to and also technically co-sponsor or technically sponsor different events, conferences, symposiums. And we are also regularly organizing special sections, special issues with top-notch venue in IEEE transactions and magazine. And end of the year we go for call for award nominations. So I don't want to spend more time on talking all this thing. So but today, as you can see, I think all of you must have that banner or the detailed program I prepared, any of that or both maybe. We have two eminent speakers today. One, our first speaker will be Professor Philip, and the second speaker will be the Professor Kedana. Each of speaker, I think they are going to speak around half an hour, and followed by 10 minutes of question and answer session. So I hope it will be fine, and we have prepared a very small program for today's event. Thank you. Let me give you a little introduction of Professor Philip. So he is a full professor in the Department of Information Technology at Ghent University in Belgium. He is a pioneering researcher in the domain of communication software, network resource management, adaptive service delivery, and efficient large-scale data processing. He is an IEEE fellow and this year has received IEEE Communication Society Dan Stokesbury Award. And currently he is serving as an editor-in-chief of IEEE Transaction on Network Service Management. So it can easily visit, I think, in the banner and also in the invitation. Everywhere I put his homepage link. If you want to know more details about him, he has received many awards, he has many achievements. You can visit his website to get more details about him. And today, the title of his talk will be Adaptive and Pie-Spurred Network Management and Service Delivery. So looking forward to listening you, Professor Philip. Over to you now.
Okay, thank you very much, Deepak. Thank you, colleagues, for the kind invitation. I hope you can clearly hear me.
Yes, it's very clear.
Okay, thank you very much. And I also shared the slides, so I assume you can.
Yes, we can see
the slides. Okay, thank you. So I will keep an eye on the time in order not to exceed the 30 minutes that I was granted. So the focus of my talk is to give you an overview of research activities that have been carrying out during the last 20 years in total. So where the focus is on adaptive and bio-inspired network management and service delivery. So maybe as a very short introduction to my research group and my research activities. So I am a staff member of Ghent University in Belgium. So Belgium is situated in Central Europe, close to France, the Netherlands, Germany, also to the UK. Ghent is situated in the north of Belgium. I'm also part of IMEC, which is a research institute in Belgium focusing on nanoelectronics, digital technologies. And my research group is called ID Lab, where the I stands for Internet Technology and the D stands for Data Science. So we focus on both Internet technologies and data science in the same research group. And very importantly, we believe it's crucial to work with industry partners to make sure to focus on realistic problems and also to ensure potential uptake of research results in the future. So for this reason, we work with a lot of industry partners. You can see a non-exhaustive list here of the research partners that we are working with. So this is a brief summary of my CV. So collaboration with industry is important. Also, research projects, collaboration with academic partners is very important in my opinion. I indeed serve as the EIC of IEEE TNSM. I will briefly explain this later as well, but very briefly, of course. And I was also past chair of the IEEE Technical Committee, not of Computer Society, but of the Communication Society. So the Network Operations and Management Technical Committee. I served as an officer, so TPC chair, vice chair, for many years. Okay, I was indeed named a fellow of the IEEE. So this is the brief description of the area for which I was elevated to IEEE fellow. And I just wanted to show you this because I belong to two societies. So I'm a member for many years of both societies. So Computer Society and the Communication Society. And so both societies also announced me when I was elevated as a fellow. Both societies mentioned my name. Okay, so the Technical Committee on Network Operations and management. There we focus on novel techniques to help operators, data center providers, service providers, to help them with efficient network operations and management of their infrastructures. Okay, so in Comstock there are 28 different technical committees, and I always advise people when they want to start a new research domain or want to reach out to researchers in a particular area, the technical committees are always a very good starting point. Very good starting point to expand your network, to get in contact with people from industry, from academia. So if you're interested in a particular topic, then I always recommend colleagues to check the available technical committees, both from the Computer Society and Communication Society, and then get in touch with the officers of these technical committees. Okay, so as Deepak mentioned, one of my main areas is on network resource management. So where we manage resources in telecommunication networks. And this is a very important topic for network operators, also network equipment manufacturers and data center providers, because it's very important to make efficient use of resources from a technical point of view, but also from a service point of view, because if you need to offer service guarantees and make sure that people are really satisfied about the service, then network resource management is very important. And also we want to make sure that services, and I will give examples of different types of services that we consider, that they can be delivered with a very high quality of experience to the end users. And of course, there is a strong competition in the industry and telecommunication domain, and also ever increasing expectations from end users. So it's very important that we can rely on very efficient resource management algorithms. So if we compare them to ad hoc solutions, they typically result in low resource utilization, high overheads, and they don't take into account the very dynamic nature of resource availability. And this dynamic nature was for me the main reason why to make use of adaptive techniques and bio-inspired techniques. Because if you have static problems to solve, then you don't really need those bio-inspired techniques. But when you solve dynamic problems that change over time and that come with new requirements over time, then you really need bio-inspired and adaptive techniques. Okay, and then an important topic is also softwareized network, so network softwareization. And in this topic, we bring virtualization concepts to the network, similar to bringing virtualization concepts to cloud computing, where virtual machines were introduced and then containers later on, allowing for a virtualization of the computing infrastructure. And softwareized networks have the same intention, the same goal for telecommunication networks. And they have proven to be very important for network operators, cloud infrastructure, and service providers. And I already provided several contributions, including one paper with almost 500 citations on this particular topic of managing virtualized network functions. So let me briefly introduce to you what is network function virtualization. So we virtualize network functions. And for this, I would like to give an example of a use case that we are all familiar with. So this is the use case of residential equipment, network equipment in our homes, in our offices. So in our homes, typically we have many screens. We also have a network router to which we connect to get access to the internet. And typically we also have set-top boxes for access to digital TV, for instance. And if we look at each of these boxes, for instance, at the network router, we can see that this box brings several network functions. And these home gateway, for instance, provides a DHCP server, a NAT router, firewall, and also provides quality of experience monitoring, so that we can have a dashboard and see at which quality, for instance, we are delivering video streams to our end users inside the home. And if we look at the set-top box, for instance, this also provides several network functions, including a decoder to decode the video streams, providing storage, so content can be stored on this hardware box. Also middleware, for instance, to interact with the remote control, so that through the remote control, we can steer the digital TV. And also we have a streaming client, which streams the video content towards our devices. So all these network functions here, so these are examples of network functions. When we apply the concept of network function virtualization, we will virtualize these network functions, which means that we will no longer execute them on a specific hardware box, but we will execute them as software components inside a data center. So we virtualize them and we will run them in a data center in the cloud instead of on dedicated hardware boxes. And as you can imagine, if you do this for a single home, then we are talking in this case about 8. So for here, 8 different software components that we will run in the cloud. But if we do this for 10 million homes, then we have a huge amount of software components that we need to run in data centers. And we need to make sure that this can be done in a very efficient way. So there is no delay for the end users, and the end users can make use of these devices as if the hardware boxes are inside their home. So this is a real challenge. And for this, we need efficient management techniques for resource allocation, for deciding where to run the software components, on which machines, close to the end users, or sometimes on the remote data center. And these software components need to be migrated, for instance, from one data center to another data center. So for this, we need a software management solution that can take into account dynamic situations and offer service guarantees to the end users. Okay, so this is the concept of network function virtualization, where today or in the past we have network functions on specific hardware, and we virtualize them. So then we run them as software components on commodity IT hardware inside data centers. And with the paradigm change of network function virtualization, we will run them inside a cloud infrastructure and providing the same service with excellent service guarantees to the end users. Okay, so the advantages of this technique are obvious, and we can distinguish between advantages for the network providers and for the service providers. So if we look at the advantages for the network operator, they can replace their dedicated hardware with generic hardware and also software-based functions. They can maximize resource utilization because it's more easy to use the available resources if you have several fine-grained software components. And instead of hardware boxes where you cannot migrate software components, you can also optimize energy usage, which is a very important advantage. And then also from the management point of view, you can make sure there is a faster and easier deployment. Also, the configuration of these software components can be done in a much faster way than configuring 10 million hardware boxes. And also importantly, maintenance and updating network functions is much easier in a software-based cloud environment than focusing on dedicated hardware components. And we can also support the network as a service business model, because it will be easier to introduce new services and to give guarantees to services. So from the service provider point of view, we can dynamically scale networks and also computing and storage resources at the same level based on the service requirements. And these service requirements, they can change over time, can be dynamic, can be taken into account. And also very importantly, which is crucial for service providers, we can significantly reduce the time to market for services, because it's much easier to deploy software components to provide a new service than to ask end users to buy a hardware device, install it in their homes. If you do so in a cloud environment, the time to market is much lower. Okay, so this is the important concept of network function virtualization, softwareized networks, where I did a lot of contributions, designed adaptive and bio-inspired algorithms. And then a second area is where I focus specifically on video services. And there I focus on adaptive service delivery. And the main concept is explained here. So we focus on delivery of video services in networks where the available bandwidth and the network conditions can change over time and kind of dynamically change over time. And so the approach that's taken here is we will segment the video into several small segments. And instead of considering an entire video file, we will consider segments over time. And these segments are typically several seconds, so 5 to 10 seconds, for instance. And for each segment, we provide a low quality segment, a medium quality segment, and a high quality segment. And of course, the high quality segments, they will consume more bandwidth. And if this bandwidth is available, we will of course switch to the high quality segments. Okay, so this is what we provide at the server side, where the video content is available. And then if we look at the client side, and for instance, we consider a smartphone or a tablet here. Here we run an algorithm, and the algorithm considers the available bandwidth that is available to the client application. And so it discovers which bandwidth is available. And when there is a high bandwidth available, then the high quality segment will be requested. But at moments that small quality is available, or small amount of bandwidth is available, then the segments with the lowest bit rate will be requested as shown in this diagram. Okay, so the decisions are made at the client side by this algorithm, but we can also introduce intelligence inside the network. So I also focused on algorithms for intelligent proxies in the network, which will intercept the messages and will, based on requests from several clients, will then make intelligent decisions and try also already to predict which qualities are available, and proactively downloads the medium qualities and the high qualities to put them closer to the user. So then, if possible, then provide high quality segments to the end users. Okay, so it's mainly client-based solution, but we also focus on intelligence inside the network. Okay, and I also would like to explain the novel concepts of video distribution that we expect in the near and more distant future. And for this, I would like to introduce volumetric media. And for introducing this, I would like to show you a timeline where we consider 2D video in 2 dimensions, with which we are all familiar, and then an evolution of this video format is 360-degree video, in which we are more immersed into the video content, and we can look in all directions. And immersiveness means that we are deeply absorbed into something. So in this case, into an activity or into an environment. And immersive media, they refer to technologies such as VR, virtual reality, augmented reality. And in several industry sectors, this is considered to be a very important technology for the future. I will give a few examples of technologies where we will use immersive media. And volumetric media is the next generation where we will use this as a technique to capture a 3-dimensional space and to show objects in a 3-dimensional space. So these objects can be viewed on flat screens, as well as using 3D displays or VR goggles. And the user experience the result in a real-time engine, and has also a direct impact in exploring the generated volumes and the generated objects. So if we focus on this volumetric media, what does it provides? It's actually an evolution from 3D images. And in traditional 3D images, we consider 2 static views which are synchronized. So namely a left and a right stream for the left and the right eye, which need to be synchronized. And then we consider holograms as the next evolution. So in a hologram, we had parallax. So parallax is the apparent displacement of an object because of a change in the observer's point of view. So by changing the observer's point of view, we have a different view of the objects, and we can more closely observe the object. So instead of 2 dimensions, we now have 6 dimensions corresponding to the possible changes in the observer's point of view. These are called the 6 degrees of freedom. So these are the different degrees of freedom in 6 dimensions that are shown here. And so instead of the 2 dimensions that we have now in our Zoom based conference application, when we consider holographic type communications, we need to consider 6 dimensions. Okay, so which are the different use cases that are important when considering volumetric media? There are 3 important ones that we consider. So there is the holographic collaboration and conferencing. So the video conferencing where we show holograms instead of 2-dimensional videos. Also in the healthcare domain, so telesurgery and remote patient monitoring are very important use cases for volumetric media. And also in the industry, so the industry 4.0 revolution, where we do remote industrial monitoring. So the produced objects in industry, they can be viewed at a remote location. They can be displayed as a hologram, and the remote operator can inspect the produced objects and can contribute to the production process, do anomaly detection, and so on. So this is a very important technology also for the industry. And then an important question is, of course, these holograms. They of course originate from science fiction movies. And an important question is, when will these holograms be available to be used in general? Okay, so in this respect, it's interesting to mention, for instance, in a German circus, they already use holograms instead of animals. And the result is amazing. A nice experience for the attendees. And we of course also remember the iconic scene from Star Wars, where Princess Leia is shown as a hologram. Both these examples are local applications, so they are not streamed over the network. They are generated locally. And if we consider the bandwidth requirements, they are in the order of gigabits per second. I will give more details on the next slides. So if we want to have remote access and stream them over the network, then we also need compression technologies, and also very important, we will need objective and real-time quality of experience monitoring techniques. So let's have a look at the bandwidth requirements for these holographic type communications. So if we consider regular HD content, so the typical 180p. So for this we need 1 to 5 megabits per second. If we then consider 360-degree video, where we can consume the video and look around in terms of immersive media, then for 4K on 4K distribution, we need 15 to 25 megabits per second. And if we scale up to 8 to 16K, then we need 100 to 500 megabits per second. Okay, but this is in 2 dimensions. If we then go to holograms and volumetric media, so then we have the 6 degrees of freedom, as I explained. And an important technology there are the point clouds. So we can represent hologram as a point cloud. So this is a set of data points in space where we can represent a 3D shape or objects. And they are generally produced by 3D scanners or photogrammetry software. And if we represent holograms through point cloud representations, they are very demanding, and it's a very complex task to generate a realistic reconstruction with full parallax, occlusion, and shadowing. And here we always focus on the objects themselves. So here you see a nice environment in the mountains where a person is skiing down a mountain. And when we consider point clouds, then we will focus on the moving objects themselves, not the environments. And for transporting such an object over the network, we typically need 0.5 to 2 gigabits per second. And another technology are the light fields technologies, where we focus on multiple images that we transport over the network. And this technology is expected to enable a new photorealistic immersive media evolution. So here we need multiple images, and then we will run intelligent algorithms to reconstruct a plane optic function. This is a 5-dimensional function representing the intensity of lights from every position and every direction in the 3-dimensional space. And for this, we need a set of example images to be able to reconstruct the plane optic function. And as you can clearly see, we really need a huge bandwidth, 100 gigabits per second, up to 2 terabits per second, to be able to transport these light field technology based images over the network. And also in terms of computational power, these light fields technology requires a very computational demanding calculation. And for this, due to the high bandwidth requirements and the extremely demanding computations, we typically use holograms point cloud representations at this moment because they are less computational expensive. Okay. Then the important question, if you look at these bandwidth requirements, then the important question is, Can the current transport and application infrastructures deal with volumetric media delivery, and which potential updates are required to the current infrastructure to make sure that we can transport volumetric media holograms over a network? For this, we did several experiments in our lab, also together with industry partners. And as I explained, we focus on point cloud representations. And these are referent point clouds where each of the point clouds need around 4 gigabits per second, or this point cloud representation even more, 5.6 gigabits per second. And we focused on 4 different objects that we transported over the network. So in total, we needed close to 19.2 gigabits per second for transporting them over the network. And we designed an adaptive streaming technique to be able to transport them over the network. So it's similar to the base version of the adaptive streaming technique that I explained. So here we don't focus on the display on a tablet or on a smartphone, but we focus on the display on a VR goggles. And also because we have several objects, several point cloud objects, we also take them into consideration. And for each of the objects, we will perform segmentation over time, and also provide these objects in small, medium, and high quality. So compared to the basic example that I gave, so here we add an additional dimension. So for each object, we add their representation. And at the client side, we can then make a selection for each of the 4 objects. We then select the required quality for each of the objects. So here we have 4 objects. So for each of the 4 objects, at every moment in time, we need to make a selection which quality level we should provide. And of course, this depends on the point of view of the end user. If the end user is particularly interested and is looking at one of the objects, then of course it's obvious, if possible, that we will deliver the highest quality. And for object where a user is not paying attention to at a certain moment in time, for this, it's of course fine to deliver them with a smaller quality. So we designed these adaptive algorithms in order to do so. And then in order to evaluate this, for video delivery, it's always important so to not only do objective evaluations, but also subjective evaluations. And we focused on experiments with 30 subjects, so 30 participants who watched the holographic streams and then gave their perception and a score, subjective score, about how they believed the quality of the transmission was. And of course, we generate different video sequences and also different configurations in terms of bandwidth, allocation, and prediction. Here you see the main results of this. So we show the mean opinion score. So this is the score that the end users gave, and we show the cumulative distribution function. So a MOS score of 100 corresponds with the very satisfied users, and the lower scores, this correspond with situations where the users are not happy at all. Okay, so if we transport video files over network and we do subjective evaluation, we of course want to be in this region, because this is the most interesting reason with the highest satisfaction by the end users. So as we clearly see from the results, we are not there yet because the obtained quality scores are not high enough, but we can clearly distinguish between the different bit rates. So we can clearly see if we have a higher bit rate available or even unlimited bandwidth. This has a positive impact on the scores that the end users provide. But the difference in observed quality of experience is not significant. And the participants, they didn't perceive the delivered data as good quality. So for all experiments, the mean opinion score was lower than 80%, and close to 60% in average. So we clearly see that there are several innovations needed in order to be able to reach a higher quality of experience. And this is an important topic in our team. The main reason for the observations that I showed is that the techniques, they don't take the latency requirements into account. And we also need, at the network layer, we need to complement with application layer approaches. And we will need a cross-layer architecture to be able to realize volumetric media delivery. And so the cross-layer architecture that we have in mind consists of three important layers. So if we want to realize truly immersive volumetric media delivery, here you see the typical holographic edge unit 1 at the client side, holographic edge unit 2 at the server side with multiple cameras here, and then the display at the client side. And we will need end user optimizations. So optimizations both at the client software side, at the server software side. Also optimizations at over the top and transport layer of the networks, and also optimizations in terms of network architectures. So we need to design novel network architectures in order to be able to realize truly immersive holographic type communications. Okay. Let me just give you an example about end user optimizations. So at the client side and at the server side. So at the client side, which optimizations are possible? And for these optimizations, we use adaptive and bio-inspired techniques. So at the client side, it's important to know there are several feeds, visual feeds, an audio feed, a tactile feed. And it's important to be able to predict the viewport of a user, so that you can predict where a user will most likely look at. And this, of course, evolves over time and depends also on the content that's being shown. Very importantly, we need synchronization of the feeds, because otherwise it feels unnatural for an end user if these different feeds are out of sync. And also very importantly is that we need to be able to assess cyber sickness, because this is a very important element when considering immersive media delivery. So cyber sickness is the unwell feeling by end users that happens due to provocative, non-expected action by the humans. And it's very important to be able to discover the exact cause and to be able to do early detection and coping mechanisms for this cyber sickness. So we believe that this is a very important topic where we will focus on during the next years, try to be able to detect and prevent the effects of cyber sickness. And for this, we will use several bio-inspired techniques. Also at the server side, we can do many optimizations. There is, based on the viewport information and the quality levels that are available at the server side, we can do further optimizations. So we can segment the objects into tiles. So not only considering a single object, but dividing them in several tiles. And each of the tiles can then be selected by the client application, also depending on the viewport of a user. So if user is looking at a particular point, depending on his position and a particular interest, some of these tiles can receive a higher quality than other tiles. And of course, we need multiple encoded representations in order to be able to realize this. Okay, so I as promised, I keep an eye on the time, and I will briefly skip the optimizations at the network level, so the transport layer and also the network level. If you are interested, of course, during the questions, we can consider these. So an important element, and here I come back to the virtualized network functions that I explained in the beginning. When we consider immersive media delivery, there are several actions that need to be taken, and each of them can be done in a virtualized network function. And then if we have a flexible network architecture where we consider service function chains, then we can deploy these virtual network functions on the most appropriate infrastructure that's available. For instance, if we have capturing of a festival and scene merging, compression and encoding can be done in a data center close to the festival location. Then we also need VNFs for transport and caching. And then the view prediction and decoding can be done, for instance, in an edge cloud close to the end users, making use of the mobile edge computing paradigms. And then, of course, the rendering and the quality of experience monitoring is most appropriate to be done close to the client at the client premises or very close to the client premises. And we considered several algorithms where to optimally place these virtual network functions for volumetric media delivery. Here are some results are shown, which were published in a very recent paper at the CNSM conference. Let me briefly go to the end of the presentation, but by mentioning that there are several open challenges, both on the application layer, also at the network layer. I give an overview here of possible optimizations that can be done to make the vision of volumetric media delivery in the future a reality. And of course, contributions from many research groups are very important. Also, several industry stakeholders should contribute, and we are working with many people in order to be able to realize this vision. I also want to briefly mention that I also sometimes focus on healthcare problems and decision support systems for hospitals, for medical applications. For instance, here you see in an intensive care unit, you see a bedside PC with software that monitors the state of the patients, their antibiotics that are given to the patient, their infection levels. And this is a detailed view of the screen that's being showed. And also during staff meetings, the software application is being used for making decisions about the treatment of the patients. And the software was developed in my team. And I was leading the efforts, and it took several years before we could realize the adoption in the intensive care units. And now they're using this on a daily basis, and they rely on the software that we developed. Okay, so so healthcare decision support systems is also a topic where I focus on, and where I apply the techniques that we also use for media delivery and for resource allocation. We also apply these techniques in healthcare systems. And we focus mainly on knowledge-driven analytics as opposed to data-driven analytics, because for healthcare use cases, it's very important that you know the reason and that you can explain to medical doctors why decisions are being made, instead of data-driven analytics, where you mainly consider black box solutions and you don't know exactly why decisions are being made. So in knowledge-driven analytics, it's more easy to explain why decisions are being made. Okay. We also developed many open source products, and one of them is for the genetic discovery of shapelets. It's called GenDis open source platform, which is available here, and is being used for efficient time series classification. And as the name suggests, we make use of genetic algorithms to facilitate the discovery of these chiplets. And typically we use this for applications in the medical domain. Okay, so in order to conclude, so very briefly about TNSM, the journal where I serve as editor-in-chief. So all the topics that I mentioned here are definitely in scope of the journal, and we typically consider 12-page papers. Also extra pages at the low costs can also be purchased. We have a regular call, so you can submit anytime. There are also special issue calls available on the website, and the current impact factor is 4.195. This is a very interesting website. It's a searchable index, tnsmoverview.org, where you can quickly look for papers based on keywords, authors, and so on, selecting publication year. And when you click on them, you go immediately to IEEE Explorer, and you can view the entire content of the papers. Okay, so these are the conferences that I am involved in as a steering committee member. So I am in NOMS, CNSM, and NetSoft. So with this, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I pass the token to Deepak. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Philip, for this detailed and interesting talk. So now I would like to ask everyone if you have any question. Can unmute if it permits, otherwise I'm going to unmute for you. You can raise hand.
Yeah, I see several questions.
Yes, Tapas.
No.
Very good evening, sir. It was a nice talk. So I want to ask you regarding this transmission and the bandwidth delay. Whether these are the same routing protocols or the marker protocols work in the same area, or is there any specific protocols that deals with this bandwidth management?
Okay, yeah, that's a very good question. In terms of protocols, we focus on the existing protocols because we believe the internet protocol is there. It doesn't make sense to design a completely new protocol. The uptake will be very slow of this. So we try to optimize the existing protocols because we believe that industry is more interested in optimizing existing protocols. So we optimize, for instance, transport layer protocols. And for instance, there is the use of HTTP version 2, for instance, together with QUIC transport protocol, which allows for low latency distribution of media. And there we can do specific optimizations and to make small adaptations to existing protocols. So that's our main focus, and also to take adaptive behavior and learning into account. So is this an answer or a partial answer to your question?
Yeah, thank you, sir. So I guess that we can apply also the cognitive protocols which are used for the both transport protocols. Also, yep. Can we have a cross-layer approach for both transport layer and network layer and data link layer, so that to optimize the use of the bandwidth? So is there an existing works so that we can? I'm also working on that layer using both the cross-layer approach and both in transport layer and data link layer. So is there any existing protocol which are working both in 3 layers so that I can have a good reference on that?
Okay, so you are asking for a reference or an overview paper. Did I capture this correctly?
Yes, I mean, I'm asking for the latest work where you are working. and that is the cross-layer approach for both transport layer and routing layer and the data link layer. Means what is the current trend of this work, so that we can work from there on.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Yes. Definitely. This is definitely an interesting area to take into account. And I can provide you more detail. So the slides, for instance, I will deliver the slides to Deepak and Amit. If they want, they can distribute. And in the slides, so let me go here. There are also several references. And there is some more information about how the over-the-top and transport optimizations work, which techniques we use, and that we propose, for instance, smart retransmission, intelligent buffering. So these provide more information and can be very helpful, in my opinion. So yes, I didn't explain these in detail, but I will deliver them to Deepak, and if Deepak wants, he can distribute.
Thank you, sir. It would be very much grateful. You can work.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Tapas. You know, maybe end of today or tomorrow, after receiving the slides from Professor Philip, definitely I'll distribute to everyone.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Bisro.
Hello, Professor Philip. I'm Biswa Pratap from Samsung Research. It was really a great talk. Thank you for touching upon many aspects of network management and volumetric media delivery. So, as I work for the 5G DAN in Samsung 5G design team, I'm just curious to know like how feasible it is, or it is for the network operator to migrate their whole network, which is essentially not very flexible and also hardware constraint, to shift to a fully softwarized network, and how you see the timeline for it.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. That's a very good question. Yes. So the concept of network function virtualization was first coined in 2012 to 2013. So about 8 years ago. And then several techniques and many different vendors, equipment vendors, they already have prototypes, and they're also already telecommunication operators who provide services based on softwareized networks. So they have cloud management solutions for this. So there is already uptake by network operators, and I expect a higher uptake during the next years because of the advantages that I explained. Maybe some people expected a faster uptake. So I mentioned the 8 years. Some people in the beginning expected 5 years, but it's proven to be a slower evolution. And then in terms of timeline for volumetric media delivery over networks, my view is that this is a topic I believe for this decade. So this was also the purpose of my overview, to give an overview of topics that need to be investigated for the next 10 years maybe. So my view is in 2030, something like this, we will be able to make use of this volumetric media delivery for the different use cases that I explained. But of course, it's very difficult to predict timelines. So maybe I will be proven wrong and it will be faster. So this is always a good thing when things come faster than you expect. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick follow-up questions. Like how do you see it, whether a fully softwareized network or maybe a partial software network and partial the existing network? How do you see it?
Do you mean the strategy to reach this point, or?
Yes.
Okay. I see. Well, my feeling is that maybe first enterprises they will try to make use of particular services that require very low latency, and then for them dedicated solutions can be developed. So network slices, and when they pay for a particular service guarantee. And then in my view, there will be interesting demonstrators, and people will be very surprised and very interested based on these demonstrators. And then in the next years, then in my view, it will also be possible for consumers, end users at home, because they have a strong interest in these low latency applications. And then my view is that the consumer markets will then also focus on it. So to answer your question, I believe first for enterprise applications, and then next for more residential consumer applications, it will be realized. So I expect like an incremental uptick in industry. That's my view, but of course this is a view, and I can be proven wrong, of course.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Philip. Nice to talk to you.
Thank you for the question. Thank you.
Arif, if you want to have a quick question, because we are running.
Yeah, Professor, thanks a lot. This is very interesting. I mean, I come from Ericsson Research Group based in Stockholm, Sweden. So we have a quite a lot of research doing on this 5G automation with the zero touch program, where AI is heavily used for configuring the network. Of course, I mean, virtualization with the virtualization. My question is like, so we have a lot of now computation is moving from cloud towards the edge near the end devices, and is there, I mean, do we have some sort of bio-inspired techniques that are used that can be applied for the edge? So is it like all the bio-inspired techniques can be used in the edge, or there's a category that cannot run on the edge?
Okay, yeah, that's a very good question, Arif. There are many very recent works on particle swarm optimizations, where they use particle swarm techniques in order to manage edge cloud resources. So this is an important technique, I believe. Also ant colony techniques, so where you mimic the behavior of ants, or techniques, and these are typically used when you need to make a decision very fast, and you don't have a lot of time for calculations. If you have more time for calculations, for instance, if you do optimizations overnight, for instance, then also genetic algorithms are often used there. But then you need a more complete overview. You need more time to do the calculations. So typically for offline algorithms for this, genetic algorithms, and then if it really needs to be online, then like ant colony or particle swarm techniques are used. But it's an area that there are a couple of papers already published there, but there is definitely a need for more thorough and more detailed investigation. So it's definitely a good topic to focus on, I believe, in my opinion, for the next period.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Another question, I mean, this volumetric use case, do you think that 6G will solve the bandwidth issue that in that use case?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I expected this question, and especially with your affiliation at Ericsson. Yes, so I definitely expect that there. So at the network layer, we really need optimization, so novel network architectures, and definitely 6G will focus on reducing latency even more, but by applying femtocell techniques and so on. So at the physical layer, and this will be very important to further reduce latencies. And the further you reduce latencies, the more beneficial this will be for the quality of experience for the end users. So in my opinion, we need optimizations on all three layers. So on the user layer, on the transport and application over the top layer, and also on the network layer. And the question that you ask, Arif, is really focused here on the network layer. And I believe several optimizations are needed there. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Philip, for this wonderful session. So please be with us. And I think now I want our Vice Chair, Amit, should take it from me to chair the session for Professor Godana.
Thanks, Deepak, and it's a wonderful session so far. Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Gordana Kronkovic. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Professor Gordana is a professor in interaction design in Salma University of Technology, and also a professor in computer science in Malarden University. Her main PhD was in physics and computer science. Our current research is extremely interesting, is in morphological computing and the connection between computation, information, and cognition via interactive agents on different levels of organization, from physics to biology and cognition. In addition to her interesting research work, she also is very active in AI for ethics. So she is a member of the faculty board and Salma AI Ethics Committee, European Network for Gender Balance in Informatics, Ethics for EU Project, and Board of Directors of Informatics Europe. She will summarize her work in the topic of natural information, morphological computation, cognition, and intelligence towards common framework for natural and artificial cognition and intelligence. Thanks, Professor Gordana, for accepting the invitation to present, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Amit, for a very nice introduction, and thanks to the organizers for inviting me to give this talk. I'm really very happy to be able to share with you my thoughts, and I would be happy to hear your comments and your thoughts about the topics. So here are the highlights of my talk. I will present you an info-computational framework for analysis of cognition and intelligence, natural and artificial, as a foundation for the study of information processing and computational phenomena. It means I will try to present you a common framework which will be useful to modeling and understanding both phenomena of natural intelligence and artificial intelligence. What is good with the common framework is that it enables two-way learning. We learn from nature how things work, and then we implement it in technology. And when we learn from technology about the constraints and ways of behavior of such model, we go back to nature and improve and refine our models of natural systems. That's exactly what is happening in deep learning, where we know that there is not only this data layer of intelligence that is covered by deep learning, but there is also a higher level of abstraction where generalization is important, where you can use symbolic approach to get even more powerful, higher level of intelligence and cognition. So this two-way communication is really central for our learning about both about technology and about nature. So when the first models of cognition and intelligence have been made 40 years ago, the situation in sciences was completely different. So what has happened the state of information physics, information chemistry, bioinformatics, neuroinformatics, computational neuroscience, complexity theory, self-organization, theory of evolution, as well as the basic concepts of information and computation, have been made enormous progress, and they are so much different from what we had 40 years ago when people proposed the first architectures for computing and intelligence. So novel developments in those sciences support constructive interdisciplinary framework for cognitive architectures, which are based on natural morphological computing, where interaction between constituents at different levels of organization of matter-energy and their corresponding time-dependent dynamics lead to complexification of agency and increase cognitive capacities of living organisms that unfold through the evolution. So we will try to see how it looks like from the simplest living organisms, cells, to their networks, to tissues, to organs, to organisms, networks of organisms, and so on. So proposed common info-computational framework for naturalizing cognition considers present updates or generalizations of the concepts of information, computation, cognition, and evolution in order to come to up-to-date state of understanding that is today actual knowledge of those fields. So we take information to be a structure, meaning that not only news or artifacts of human civilizations like books and such things that are used to transmit data and knowledge, but similar structures which are used by other living organisms, even the most simple ones like bacteria. We talk about information exchange in a single cell and how it affects the behavior or problem-solving ability of those simplest organisms. We take computation to be dynamics of information. So any processes of information transformation that leads to behavior, and not only those processes that we currently are using to calculate manually or by machinery, not only symbol manipulation, but also those low-level information processing processes. Cognition is taken to be ability to learn from environment and adapt so to survive as individual and species, for which organisms use information and is processing computation. So intelligence is taken to be capacity for problem solving, and it can be found in all organisms as they all possess cognition. So we look at the cognition as an ability which comes in degrees from a single cell to a much more complex organisms, or what we typically think about when we say cognition, we think about brain. But actually, each cell of the brain is also cognitive system. And not only that, but each cell in the nature is also cognitive system. And this is really interesting to know because we are trying to solve problems, technological problems. For example, nanobots. How to control program nanobots. We don't need nanobots which will be able to write philosophical books. We need such intelligence which is suitable for the context of a nanobot. It's a simple intelligence, but it's still intelligent behavior. They should be able to solve their own problems. And those are low-level problems, but anyway, intelligent problems. So why we are looking at natural organisms, very simple natural organisms, which are solving constraints from the environment and the interactions with the environment and improving and learning, adapting and all that, we are studying those processes as intelligence or cognition on that level. And we have many levels of intelligence and cognition. And up to now, as I said already, we have been studying cognition and intelligence solely as a property of a humans or a human brain, to be concrete. So when the first computers were constructed, it was having human brain in mind. And we have learned since then, we have learned a lot. And we have learned about embodied, embedded, enacted cognition, which is much more than the brain. It's a brain in its context, having a body, having sensors, actuators, interactions with the environment, and so on and so forth. And then, if we want to understand how to develop those systems, or how those systems developed in nature, how we can observe that from single cells organisms in nature, we can through the evolutionary layers, we can see how they developed towards more and more complex organisms. So evolution is a very crucial process. And we can say, and the people have been elaborating and writing a lot about the details of evolution as a computational process. For example, Aaron Sloman has written a lot about evolution and meta-evolution, evolution of evolution, and is a computational process. So today people are interpreting evolution in the terms of extended evolutionary synthesis, where we don't only look at the genes and the behavior of the organisms, but also the influence of an organism on the environment and the influence of the environment on the organism. So, and those processes are very, very suitable to be modeled as computational processes. So we are talking about morphological computing, and that is the computing happening in morphology. Morphology describes material, shape, structure of a body, physical embodied system, which is changing in interaction with the environment. So we are trying to learn from biology. So not only from the brain, which was traditional approach, but learning from biological systems in general, from simple systems, and following their evolutionary process, and learning how they get more and more complex. So in this slide, I repeat this, that human has been taken to be cognizing agent by definition. When you say cognition, even to this day, if you open even Wikipedia, you will say cognition is defined on the level of human. But today, if we want to develop micro technologies, nanotechnologies, Internet of Things, many other technologies where we do not really need human level cognition or human level intelligence, we need a degree of intelligence specific for the context where we will be using it. So we can learn a lot from natural systems. I mentioned the new book from Piccinini from last year, where he presented a neurocentric approach to intelligence, including not only humans, but all living organisms that have a nervous system. However, nervous system is, yeah, of course, it is biological computing and neurocomputing and everything that will help us learn a lot. But even more, if you relax this condition, if we allow other living organisms to possess a level of cognition and intelligence, we will learn even more. So I refer to Levin, Michael Levin, from this year, where he says cognitive operations that we usually ascribe to brains, like sensing, information processing, memory, valence, decision-making, learning, anticipation, problem-solving, generalization, and goal-directedness, all of those are observed in living forms that don't have brains or even neurons. They call it basal cognition, and you will find them in single cells. So it is really very important to understand how those basic abilities, which we trace back to single cells, how they developed and what we can do of them, and what is their role for intelligence and cognition of the simplest organisms. And this approach to understanding development and evolution of intelligence could be based on the idea of evolution as proposed by Ginsburg and Jablonka from 2019, and Jablonka and Lamb 2014. So it is extended evolutionary synthesis, and they present evolution in 4 dimensions: genetic, epigenetic, behavioral, and symbolic variation in the history of life. All those factors influence the evolution of organisms or evolution of life. So one of very nice examples of a study of cognition in organisms which do not have any neurons or brains or anything, simple bacteria, which use chemical language to communicate and often exchange pieces of DNA to cement solutions which have been proven to be successful strategies. Those things have been studied by Benny Bassler, in forms of bacterial quorum sensing, where bacteria communicate in sort of language, chemical language, and they negotiate about how to behave in certain situation by quorum sensing, by sensing what the majority would decide. And also in the work of Ben Jacob, Eshel Ben Jacob, especially in the paper Bacterial Know-how, from physics to cybernetics, you can follow the basics of intelligent and cognitive behavior, even language behavior, in such simple organism as bacteria, bacterial film or bacterial network. So a framework for natural cognition based on info computation. So you take this information to be the structure, you take the data and the relations between the data into the context of observer relative, and you study the dynamics of behavior of those data, and in living agents you can follow the mechanisms of behavior which lead to more and more complex structures, and then those structures enable more and more complex new behaviors. So cognition in nature is manifestation of biological processes in all living beings that subsume chemical and physical level of organization of matter in nature. And intelligence, as I mentioned, is considered a problem-solving ability on different levels of organization. So bacteria solve their own problems, humans solve other classes of problems. But there is a problem-solving ability even in those single-cell organisms. And for that, evolution provides a generative mechanisms where you can trace the development of organisms in evolutionary scale. Okay, so I mentioned that there is a development last 40 years in cognitive architectures, and there was last year a paper, comprehensive overview of those 40 years of cognitive architectures by Kotzeruba-Hatzossos, and they evaluated modeling of core cognitive abilities in humans, but only briefly mentioned biologically plausible approaches, because they are really only interested in humans. And of course, those 40 years were characterized by focus on humans. So it's not so unexpected that they focus on humans. But what is getting more and more interesting is to acknowledge the development of biological approaches and biologically plausible approaches. So unlike vast majority of artificial cognitive architecture, which target human level cognition, we would like to focus on the development and evolution of the continuum of natural cognitive architectures from basal cellular cognitive architecture and up, as studied by Michael Levin. And the work of Levin is really excellent example which illustrates how interdisciplinary work from biology to computing, theory of computer science and applications can be very fruitful and inspiring. And we'll learn a lot about concrete mechanisms that really are acting on this level of basal cognition of single cells. And the computation that is driving those dynamical processes on the cell level is natural computation. And I have this quote here defining this natural computation or computing nature by Chaitin from 2006. And how about the entire universe? Can it be considered to be a computer? Yes, it certainly can. It is constantly computing its future state from its current state. It's constantly computing its own time evolution. And Chaitin says that the first person who has expressed those thoughts was Tom Toffoli. He pointed out that actual computers like our PCs just hitch a ride on this universal computation. Matter on the level of physical processes and chemical and biological and all those processes that we have on different levels is performing this natural computing. We can see the nature as a computational network of networks. So it's very, very interesting that we can use and ground our ideas about computing on those general ideas of computing nature. So you have links here to those works about what is computation and how does nature compute. So not only biological systems, but also all of nature computes. Of course, it is not intelligent computing in all of nature. It is natural computing. Intelligence comes with units that have identity, that have goals, and those are the first living organisms. So before living organisms, it makes no sense to talk about intelligence, degree of intelligence. And yes, you can say, how did the first organism appear on Earth? Some sort of conditions must be fulfilled for something to be an organism. And when it starts to be an organism with goals and with the identity, then it is pursuing its own goals and solving its own problems and needs intelligence. So this is about computing nature or naturalist computationalism, just to make this a very important distinction between pan-computationalism, which is computing nature, and pan-psychism, which would say all of nature has intelligence. That is not what we are saying here. We are saying that all of living nature has need for intelligence and has intelligence and cognition. And all of nature computes or performs those processes which are processes in physical substrate. So that is what we call morphological computation. So I hope that I made it clear the distinction between the two, why we claim that living systems possess degree of intelligence and cognition, and the underlying processes are processes of information transformation, which is computation, which is morphogenesis or morphological computing. And here is the reference to some work on the connection between cognition and life, which says that cognition corresponds to life. So it's based by a number of papers like Stewart from 1996 and Maturana and Varela from 1992. I have also written a number of papers arguing for this view, and that is the way to explain how life starts and how cognition and intelligence start to develop in living organisms and in nature. And I also mentioned the work of Michael Levin from Tufts University. Please check his webpage of his lab. He is doing enormously amazing research. They newly published a work on xenobots, which are small living systems they produced from frog skin, which they got to reproduce, and very interesting behavior already on that level. So exploring what is needed for self-reproduction, what is needed for goal-directed behavior, and how it connects to properties of cells. So he's working on biological cognition. Levin Lab is working on biological cognition, connecting genetic networks, cytoskeleton, neural networks, tissue organs, organisms with the group social level of information processes, where you have groups of organisms communicating, exchanging information. So Levy shows how biology has been computing through somatic memory, information storage, and biocomputation or decision-making in pre-neural bioelectric networks before the development of neurons and brains. So there is a history of development of neuron. In somatic cells, you will find properties of neurons just in the very beginning of their development. So those insights from biocognition can help in the development of AI platforms, applications in targeted drug delivery, regenerative medicine, and cancer therapy, nanotechnology, synthetic biology, artificial life, and much more. So those are very promising research avenues, and it will certainly take some years, but many discoveries are coming unexpectedly quickly. So we will see how many years will be needed to get more details about this basal biocognition and what we can practically use from this knowledge. So types of physical or morphological computation in solid state inanimate matter used for computation today are different and not capable of self-organizing cognitive agency. That is a fundamental feature of living organisms. So there is a lot of difference in how we construct computers today compared to biological computers, living cell, let's say. And we will come back to this statement. From what I said through the lecture today, it is clear that embodiment is fundamental for cognition, and mechanisms of cognition based on natural computation and morphological computation are based on abstract symbol manipulation. Are more sophisticated than machine-like classical computational models based on abstract symbol computation. So those levels of computation that we find in single cells are both lower level, signal level, but also we have been talking about chemical language which bacteria are using to communicate with each other and to adapt to quickly adapt to the environment. So this is also expressed in many works, both older ones from 1991 George Campis have been pointing out this essential difference between our classical computers and biological computing, and also newly Vitsani and Balushka have been claiming that rule-based machines are not good enough models of natural cognition of highly complex living organisms. And that's what we would like to have, a good model of high-level cognition, not only the simplifications of this. And embodiment is fundamental characteristics of cognition, which implies that senses, feelings, and emotions must be considered as constitutive of cognition. And that's a separate topic, which I have been addressing in some other papers, but just keep in mind that this is really important to take into account physical embodiment of computation. Peter Denning has been developing this idea of computing as a fourth scientific domain. So he would say that computing in itself is a new scientific domain, and there is a need to integrate computing with the rest of sciences. And as I mentioned, this two-way learning from computational modeling to nature, and from nature back inspiration to new computational models. There is also a work from Paul Rosenblum on computing the fourth great scientific domain from 2015, where he also makes this statement that computing provides a new framework for studying, scientific studying of nature. And when we use this type of thinking to construct new devices and new approaches, we are in biomimetic design. And there are many questions which are connected to this inspiration from nature and trying to use natural strategies to solve engineering problems. One of the questions is, what does it mean biologically plausible? Because when we look at biology, it has different layers of organization. What would it mean to be biologically plausible? And those approaches are used for cognitive behaviors and their simulation, emulation, and engineering. And in different models and in different situations, contexts, we use different levels of biological modeling, and plausibility concerns this level where we are modeling. Two open questions that run in parallel in this learning from nature to technology and back, as described by Rosenberg and Kari in their paper from 2008. You will find all those references also in the reference list in the end of the presentation. And you will find my presentation on my webpage. And I will also send the presentation as well. So the two questions are how cognition works and develops in nature, and how we can simulate, emulate, and engineer that which we find in nature. And here is the very new book from the date is 2022 by Victor Erokin. Fundamentals of Organic Neuromorphic Systems by Springer. which is on the level of human brain. Now we are back to the brain-inspired computation, because the author has really very important analysis of what we are missing today and what we need for the future. The one thing is involvement of the same elements for memorizing and processing of the information. You know this von Neumann bottleneck, that you are moving data back and forth from memory to processor. There is already idea of memristors which are used to solve this problem, but it is the topic that is worth addressing. Then a variation of electrical properties according to the Hebbian or similar learning rules. So in the brain, we have this very elegant way how we learn, many times repeating the same path, neural path through the brain. When they get excitation, they do it many times, and then those connections are getting stronger and stronger. This Hebbian learning is something that could be and should be, according to the author, emulated or simulated or somehow implemented in our computing machinery. Also, possibility of working in auto-oscillation generation mode. We know that living systems are staying stable and they are not decaying, even though they are out of equilibrium state. Because of those oscillations, they are kept organized in this oscillation mode. So having using oscillations also for connecting different oscillators in the brain and getting different modes of oscillation of the whole brain in the dynamic modeling of brain is something that is that people actually have been addressing. I have in the next slides. I have a reference. Let's see where I have it. Yeah, this is the reference. So Bharta Ghosh, Krishna, Ashwani, and so on. Design of and construction of a brain-like computer, a new class of frequency fractal computing using wireless communication in a supramolecular organic inorganic system. So there is a reference and the link to the work which really starts to address this question of auto-oscillation generation mode in a computing cognitive system. And then formation of stable change of signal transfer balance between plasticity and stable long-term connections. That is how in the beginning you have imprinting, the very deep memories that are formed in early childhood, and then the less deep memories which are formed later on. And then he mentions materials used for electronic computers must be self-organized into 3D systems, mimicking intrinsic brain functions. So for living systems, self-organization is absolutely fundamental. And he proposes our learning from nature, how to get systems which are self-organized. So I'm building this argument on the biological computational mechanisms, and as I several times mentioned, Levin explains how on the most elementary level of processing and spatiotemporal integration needed to construct and regenerate complex body arises from capabilities of single cells, which evolution accepted and scaled up as behavioral repertoires of complex nervous systems that underlie familiar examples of cells. So those basic functions, basic mechanisms are underlying all of our cognition, from this basal to the high level brain cognition. And the definition of biological computation that that says that living organisms perform computations, and that as such, abstract ideas of information and computation may be key to understand biology, and also can be used for computing in technology. This is the paper that I referred to by Mitchell, so from 2010. And there is also the link to her paper titled Biological Computing, Biological Computation. And the things that I already mentioned and that I just point out here again, that is computational efficiency of natural computing. It is much, much less energy intensive than the classical computing. And it is becoming a really big issue as we are introducing Internet of Things and everything computes, everything is intelligent. So we will need computing which is not using as much energy as it does today. And then some references to this, and also the reference to the need of better temporal model. So temporal, more biological realism in temporal behavior of computational, cognitive computational systems. So when we model cognitive systems and intelligence systems, they are not nearly as complex from the point of view of temporal dependencies as real life cognitive systems are. So there is a huge space of for development in this temporal sense. Okay, and so the last question I want to ask is, in what way is this computation, which we call physical computation, morphological computation, biological computation, in what ways is it computation? Is it computation at all? You know, in robotics, there are people like Rolf Pfeiffer and Vincent Miller and many others who are writing about morphological computation. This is a specific idea about morphological computation in robotics, where you use a body to perform behavior instead of centrally controlling behavior, each coordinate of the hand, how it moves. You use the properties of physical body to perform this motion. So it has been used to passive walker, to the robot hand that closes automatically and so on. Roboticists were discussing if it is a real computation or not, and it is still an open question. I wrote several papers, and I was always claiming that this is analog computation, this is computation. So there is a paper that I refer here by Mark Bergin, who is mathematician and computer scientist, and myself, which presents a taxonomy of computation and information architectures. It is presented at EXA conference 2015, and you have the link to this. And one of those classifications that we present there is which is called essential taxonomy, is to physical or embodied object-based computations, abstract or structural or sign-based computations, and cognitive or mental or interpretation-based computations. Those cognitive computations, those are in principle connected with both of previous ones. So cognitive computations in our brains, they are connected to physical objects, molecules that are performing computations in our cells and tissues and everything, and then abstract symbol manipulation computation, which we can, which for example Aaron Sloman describes as virtual machine running on this basic physical machine. which performs language level computations. So this physical analog or morphological computation, that is a computation according to taxonomy. So, and I provide a number of references, and also I would like to thank the Swedish Research Council, which has been financing this project I'm working within, which is Morcom at Cox, Morphological Computation for Cognitive Systems. You can find my works on those two links, publications in full text below, and the link, the first link is for presentations, and you will find even this presentation under this link. So if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer or discuss. And if you don't remember questions right now, I will be happy to discuss even via mail. So you have my mail address here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Gordana, for an excellent talk. I was thinking while you were speaking, we had some discussion on the naming of the STC, whether to call it brain-inspired or bio-inspired. And my logic was that bio-inspired is much more holistic than brain-inspired. And I sincerely believe that the future is bio-inspired. And thanks for talking more about that point. So let us take some questions now. Please, you can raise your hands or unmute yourself. Maybe I can start with a quick question. So because many of these things do sometimes sound very futuristic, are you aware of any industrial applications of bio-inspired computing, the kind of things that you talked about?
Yes, my work is mostly focused on theoretical part of the problem, but I'm aware of memory store applications that are being developed by both Intel and I think you will know better, IBM and Huawei and other big industries have already started to develop memory stores. So memory stores are typical solution which comes from biology, where we have noticed that von Neumann architecture takes so much time for moving the data from memory to processor unit and back and forth. So it uses too much energy and too much time, and that's solved by memory store neuromorphic chips. That's one.
Thanks. There is one question in the chat from Madhusmita Mishra, who asked, how is it, okay, the question is how to implement 5D printing. Like, are these interesting new concepts relevant to what they're talking about in 5D printing?
Yeah, I think this level of problems, like how to do something, I expect it to be solved by people like you who know much more about concrete context for the problem. So that was why I was very happy to get this opportunity to talk with people who know much more about concrete engineering situation. I would be happy to hear if you have an idea, if you have any hunch how this could be done.
Yeah, thanks for that interesting answer. But of course, because of the limited time, if any of the audience have got any further questions, please feel free to reach Professor Gordana using her email. And of course, we will email everyone the slides from today later. Thank you very much, Professor. And then now I hand over to Dr. Deepak to continue the program.
Thank you so much, Professor Gordana, for this interesting talk, and Amit for sharing this one. Thank you. I think for next few minutes, so this is, I think, so one of the important session. Uh, we have selected few recipients in different category. So also in many category, we did find a potential candidate. That's why actually we haven't selected. So our first category for IEEE Bioinspired Computing STC, the Research Innovation Award. Let's congratulate Professor Philip. Congratulations, Professor Philip, for receiving this one. And he is receiving this award for his outstanding research contributions to adaptive service delivery and design of band-spread algorithms for network and service management. Thank you, Professor Philip.
Thank you.
So in our next category, Outstanding Leadership Award, we have 3 recipients in this category. So our first award is going to Professor BC-STC. He is a chair professor from Indian Institute of Technology. He has received many achievements. So he is receiving this award for his outstanding contribution to design of bioinspired computing techniques for power system planning, operation, control, management, and protection. Congratulations, Professor Panikrai.
Thank you. Namaskar.
And our next recipient of Outstanding Leadership Award, that is congratulate Professor Mikan Q for receiving this award. He is a professor and department head at Texas A&M University in Commerce. So he is receiving this award for his outstanding contribution on solving computer science problems using genetic algorithms for cybersecurity, healthcare, and heterogeneous system. Congratulations, Professor Mekin. I don't know whether he is here because it's a early morning in US. So in our next category, this is the Outstanding Service Award. So we have selected recipient Professor Biswapratap Singh Sahu. He is a senior researcher in Samsung Research. He is with us, and also he has contributed significantly in the community activities, promotions, all the events in the bioinspired computing STC. So congratulate Biswapratap for this award. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So lastly, we have also one category for the Outstanding Paper Award. So we have received a few nominations. We have selected this paper towards artificial emotional intelligence for cooperative social human machine interaction. This paper published in IEEE Transactions on Computational Social Systems in the year 2021. Congratulations to all the authors. Let's congratulate them. So these are the all award category where we have selected 1 or 2 recipients. So we didn't find the deserving candidates in other category. That's why we didn't award it. So congratulations again for all the award recipients. And soon one of our STC member is going to contact you for your personal, so for your postal address, your personal contact number, or to post that plaque. So when the plaque is ready, definitely we are going to post you. And also through email, we are going to send you a soft copy of the award soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining, and I would like to congratulate each and every award recipients. Thank you again.